The screaming stopped 3 days ago. Commissar Marcus Thorne knows this because he has been counting the seconds since the Greenskins dragged away Sergeant Keller, whose voice had been the last human sound in the fetid darkness of their cage. Now there is only the constant rumble of the Ork war machine, the grinding of gears and the roar of badly tuned engines that never sleep, never rest, never show mercy to those caught in their metal jaws. Thorne presses his face against the rusted bars of their prison, a cage welded from scrap metal and suspended 20 meters above the factory floor of the Ork war camp. Below him, hundreds of greenskins toil at their crude machines, building weapons of war with the same enthusiasm that other species might reserve for religious ceremonies. Sparks fly from welding torches operated by Ork mechs whose understanding of engineering seems to consist entirely of making things bigger, louder, and more likely to explode. The stench is overwhelming. Ork sweat mixed with machine oil, burned metal, and the sweet, sick smell of human decay. Thorne has stopped trying to identify the sources of that last odor. Some knowledge serves no purpose except to break what remains of a man's sanity. "Commissar?" The voice comes from the shadows at the back of the cage, weak but still recognizably human. Private Vance, 18 years old and conscripted from an agri-world whose name Thorne can no longer remember. The boy has been unconscious for most of the past day, his body finally succumbing to the infections that have claimed 3 of their number since their capture. "I'm here, Private." Thorne crawls across the filthy floor of their cage to where Vance lies shivering despite the oppressive heat. The young soldier's uniform is little more than rags now, torn and stained with substances that Thorne prefers not to contemplate. "Are we going to die here, sir?" The question comes without self-pity, asked in the same tone Vance might have used to inquire about the weather. The boy has seen too much in the past weeks to waste energy on false hope. Thorne considers lying. It would be a kindness, perhaps, to offer empty reassurances about rescue and redemption. But lies serve no purpose in a place like this where truth is measured in heartbeats and every breath might be the last. "Yes, Private. We are going to die here." The young soldier nods, accepting this information with the same stoic resignation that has kept him functional since their capture. "Will it hurt, sir?" "Yes. It will hurt very much." Another nod. Vance closes his eyes, not in despair, but with the weary acceptance of someone who has run out of strength to fight against the inevitable. "Thank you for not lying to me, sir." Thorne reaches out to place a hand on the boy's shoulder, offering what comfort he can through simple human contact. It is a small gesture, meaningless in the context of their situation, but it is all he has left to give. Their cage sways slightly as something massive moves past it on the factory floor below. Through the bars, Thorne can see a war engine taking shape under the supervision of a big mech whose cybernetic enhancements gleam with fresh welding marks. The machine is crude by Imperial standards, its armor plating uneven and its weapon systems jury-rigged from salvaged components. But it is also functional, possessed of the brutal efficiency that marks all Ork technology. That is the thing about the greenskins that Imperial tacticians never quite grasp. They are not mindless savages despite what the propaganda vids suggest. They are something worse. They are a species that has achieved perfect unity between their nature and their purpose. Every Ork existing in complete harmony with the cosmic role they were bred to fulfill. Humans fight because they must. Orks fight because they cannot imagine doing anything else. Thorne has been a prisoner of the Greenskins for 47 days now, though time moves strangely in the perpetual twilight of the war camp. The sun rises and sets somewhere beyond the smoke and fire of the Ork industrial complex, but its passage is marked only by subtle changes in the quality of light that filters down through the haze of pollutants. He was captured during the retreat from Hive Ters, when the 47th Cadian Regiment's defensive line finally collapsed under the weight of the Ork assault. The Greenskins had come in waves, their crude vehicles grinding across the rockcrete wasteland while artillery shells fell like rain around them. The Imperial forces had fought with discipline and courage, their lasguns cutting through the green tide with practiced efficiency. But discipline and courage mean nothing when faced with an enemy that feels no fear and knows no retreat. The Orks had simply kept coming, absorbing casualties that would have broken any rational military force, while their own crude weapons found their marks among the defenders. One by one, the Imperial positions had fallen, until only scattered groups of survivors remained to be hunted down by the victorious greenskins. Thorn's own capture had been almost anticlimactic. Separated from his unit during the chaos of the retreat, he had taken shelter in a bombed-out Administratum building, hoping to wait for nightfall before attempting to reach the evacuation zone. But the Orks had found him first, a hunting party of boys led by a scarred Nob, whose left arm had been replaced with a massive power claw. The interrogation had been brief and entirely one-sided. The Orks had no interest in strategic intelligence or tactical information. They simply wanted to know if he could fight, and when they determined that he could, they had thrown him into the cage with the other prisoners. That had been the beginning of his education in the true nature of Ork society. The greenskins do not take prisoners in the way that civilized species understand the concept. They do not capture enemies for ransom or intelligence gathering or as bargaining chips in future negotiations. They take prisoners for entertainment, as living trophies to prove their superiority in battle. But entertainment in Ork society takes many forms. Some prisoners are fed to the squigs, the vicious creatures that serve as both livestock and living weapons in greenskin culture. These unfortunate souls provide sport for the Orks, who gather to watch as trained squigs tear their victims apart with savage enthusiasm. The process is usually quick, though not always merciful. Others are used as test subjects for new weapons or cybernetic enhancements, their screams providing valuable data about the effectiveness of whatever crude invention the mechs have created. These experiments rarely have any scientific value by Imperial standards, but they serve their purpose in the context of Ork technology, where trial and error is the primary method of advancement. Still others are kept as gladiators, forced to fight in brutal contests for the amusement of the Ork masses. These combats are rarely fair, often pitting unarmed humans against mechanical opponents or forcing them to battle each other while the greenskins place bets on the outcome. Survival in such contests is possible, but it requires a willingness to abandon everything that makes one human. Thorn has watched all of these fates befall his fellow prisoners, each death teaching him something new about the species that holds him captive. The Orks are not cruel in the way that humans understand cruelty. They do not torture for the sake of causing suffering or kill for the pleasure of watching others die. They simply exist in a state of perpetual warfare, and everything they do serves that fundamental purpose. To an Ork, a prisoner is raw material to be processed into entertainment or resources. The suffering of their captives is incidental to this process, no more significant than the smoke produced by their factories or the noise generated by their vehicles. It is a byproduct of their existence rather than a goal to be pursued. This realization brings no comfort. If anything, it makes their situation more horrifying. At least human cruelty stems from recognizable emotions, twisted though they might be. Ork indifference to suffering is absolute, arising from a worldview so alien that it defies comprehension. The cage shudders as something large and metallic crashes to the factory floor below. Thorn peers through the bars to see a partially assembled battle wagon lying on its side, its crude wheels spinning uselessly in the air. Ork workers swarm over the wreckage, some attempting to right the vehicle while others simply strip it for useful components. No one appears to be injured by the accident, though several boys are now sporting fresh dents in their armor. They seem to consider these marks of honor rather than cause for complaint, comparing the size and depth of their new scars with obvious pride. This casual relationship with violence extends to every aspect of Orc society. Death is common and generally welcomed, provided it comes in battle or through spectacular accident. To die of old age or disease is considered shameful, a sign that an Orc has failed to live up to the aggressive ideals of his species. For prisoners, this creates a unique form of torment. They are kept alive not out of mercy or compassion, but because their deaths must serve the entertainment needs of their captors. A prisoner who dies from disease or despair robs the Orcs of their sport, and such waste is considered highly offensive to greenskin sensibilities. Commissar. Another voice from the shadows, this one belonging to Trooper Hask, a veteran of 20 years' service whose left leg was shattered during their capture. The injury has festered in the filthy conditions of their cage, filling the air with the sweet stench of gangrene. I think it's time. Thorn knows what the trooper means. They have discussed this possibility during the long hours of waiting, the point at which continued existence becomes more cruel than merciful. Hask's infection has spread throughout his system, poisoning his blood and filling his body with toxins that cause constant agony. Are you certain? The question is ritual rather than genuine inquiry. They both know that Hask's condition will only worsen, that he faces days or weeks of increasing suffering before the infection finally claims him. I am, sir. I'd rather go out on my own terms than give the greenskins the satisfaction. Thorn nods, understanding the trooper's choice even as it weighs on his conscience. As commissar, he has the authority and responsibility to grant the Emperor's mercy to those under his command when circumstances warrant such action. But in this cage, suspended above the Orc factory floor, he lacks even the tools necessary to perform this final duty. I cannot make it quick, trooper. I understand, sir. Just make sure they don't get to use me for sport. The method they settle on is strangulation, using strips torn from their uniform to create a makeshift noose. It is not dignified, but dignity is a luxury they can no longer afford. Hask faces his death with the same stoicism that has characterized his service, his final words a whispered prayer to the Emperor. The act of killing one of his own men, even in mercy, leaves Thorn feeling emptied of everything that once gave his life meaning. He has spent his career enforcing discipline and inspiring courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Now he finds himself administering death to prevent suffering, a perversion of everything the commissariat represents. But this is what the Orcs do to those they capture. They do not simply kill or torture their prisoners. They corrupt them, forcing them to abandon their humanity piece by piece until nothing remains but the animal desire to survive at any cost. Below in the factory, the Orcs continue their work with mechanical enthusiasm, oblivious to the small tragedy playing out in the cage above them. To them, the death of a single prisoner is no more significant than the failure of a machine component. Both are simply part of the natural order of things, events to be noted and then forgotten as attention turns to more pressing concerns. Night falls over the war camp, though the activity on the factory floor never slows. Orcs do not require as much sleep as humans, and their industrial operations continue around the clock, fed by slaves captured from a dozen different worlds. The sound is constant and overwhelming, a symphony of destruction that serves as the soundtrack for every waking moment. Thorn tries to sleep, but rest remains elusive in the swaying cage with its cargo of human misery. Instead, he finds himself thinking about the nature of the enemy that holds them captive, trying to understand the mindset of a species so fundamentally different from humanity. Orcs are not born as humans understand the concept. They do not emerge from wombs or grow from seeds planted in fertile soil. Instead, they sprout from fungal spores that are released when an orc dies, taking root in any environment that can support life and growing into new members of the species. This method of reproduction shapes every aspect of their society. Orks feel no familial bonds, no parental instincts, no sense of continuity between generations. Each individual emerges fully formed with instinctive knowledge of their role in greenskin culture. They do not learn to fight or build or lead others. These abilities are encoded in their genetic structure, passed down through fungal inheritance rather than conscious teaching. The result is a society that is both incredibly cohesive and utterly individualistic. Every orc knows exactly what is expected of them, but they pursue these expectations with personal enthusiasm rather than social obligation. They fight because they want to fight, build because they enjoy building, and conquer because conquest brings them satisfaction. This makes them uniquely dangerous opponents. Human armies are held together by discipline, loyalty, and the threat of punishment for desertion. Remove these bonds and the force dissolves into chaos. But orc armies are held together by shared joy and violence, and this joy only increases in the face of casualties or setbacks. To an orc, a battle that results in heavy losses is not a defeat but a spectacular success. The dead have achieved the ultimate expression of their nature, and their deaths inspire the survivors to even greater acts of violence. Retreat is not a tactical necessity but a missed opportunity for glorious combat. This philosophy extends to their treatment of prisoners. Humans who are captured represent not just trophies of victory, but opportunities for continued entertainment. The suffering of their captives proves that the orcs are dominant, that their strength is superior to that of their enemies. But this dominance must be constantly reinforced through displays of power and cruelty. A prisoner who is simply locked away and forgotten serves no purpose in orc society. They must be used, their degradation serving as ongoing proof of greenskin superiority. Morning arrives with the sound of mechanical hammering as the orcs begin another day of construction and destruction. Thorn watches through the bars as work crews assemble weapons of war with the same casual efficiency that human workers might bring to manufacturing consumer goods. The difference is that every orc genuinely enjoys their work. There are no forced laborers in greenskin society, no conscripts or prisoners pressed into service against their will. Every individual participates in the war effort because violence and construction are the activities that bring them the greatest satisfaction. This enthusiasm creates a feedback loop that makes orc society increasingly efficient at producing implements of war. The better they become at building weapons, the more successful they are in battle. The more successful they are in battle, the more resources they capture to build even better weapons. Human industrial capacity is limited by worker fatigue, resource allocation, and the need to maintain civilian populations. Orc productivity is limited only by the availability of raw materials and the imagination of their mechs. Every captured world becomes a factory for producing more instruments of destruction. The cage lurches as something impacts the support structure that holds it suspended above the factory floor. Thorn grabs the bars to steady himself, looking down to see an orc boy operating a crane with more enthusiasm than skill. The greenskin is attempting to move a partially completed artillery piece, but his understanding of load limits appears to be purely theoretical. The artillery piece swings wildly on its chain, smashing into workbenches and sending other orcs diving for cover. But rather than expressing anger at this display of incompetence, the witnesses burst into raucous laughter, slapping the crane operator on the back and congratulating him on the spectacular nature of his failure. This reaction illustrates another fundamental difference between human and orc psychology. Humans fear failure because it threatens their survival and social standing. Orcs welcome spectacular failure because it provides entertainment and often leads to even more interesting developments. The crane operator, emboldened by the positive response to his mishap, immediately begins attempting even more ambitious maneuvers with his equipment. The artillery piece swings in increasingly wild arcs, demolishing a supply depot and scattering tools across the factory floor. Other orcs gather to watch this impromptu performance, shouting encouragement and making suggestions for how the crane operator might cause even more impressive destruction. Someone produces a crude betting pool, with orcs wagering on how long it will take for either the crane or the artillery piece to break completely. The spectacle continues for almost an hour before the inevitable conclusion. The crane's mechanical systems finally surrender to the abuse they have been subjected to, and the entire apparatus collapses in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The artillery piece crashes to the factory floor with tremendous force, its impact creating a crater in the rockcrete surface. The crane operator emerges from the wreckage covered in oil and sporting several fresh cuts, but grinning with obvious satisfaction at the mayhem he has created. The other orcs cheer his performance and immediately begin salvaging useful components from the debris. Within minutes, the destroyed crane has been stripped for parts, and work crews are already planning how to incorporate its remains into new construction projects. Nothing is wasted in orc society, and every disaster becomes an opportunity for innovation. This efficiency in the face of chaos is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of greenskin culture. Humans require order and planning to function effectively. Remove these structures and human society collapses into dysfunction. But orcs thrive on chaos, using it as fuel for their creative and destructive impulses. The cage sways gently as the factory floor settles after the morning's entertainment. Thorn looks around at his remaining companions, counting the survivors of their original group. Of the 23 Imperial guardsmen who were captured with him, only 7 remain alive. The others have succumbed to disease, despair, or the various forms of entertainment provided for their captors. Private Vance is still breathing, though his condition continues to deteriorate. Trooper Martinez sits in the corner staring at nothing with the blank expression of someone whose mind has retreated from unbearable reality. Sergeant Cole maintains the pretense of military discipline, keeping his uniform as clean as possible and attempting to maintain morale among the survivors. The remaining prisoners are civilians captured during the evacuation of Hive Ters, a clerk from the Administratum who has not spoken in over a week, a tech priest whose mechanical augmentations were torn away by curious orcs, leaving him more dead than alive, a young woman whose crime was being in the wrong place when the greenskins overran her district. Each of them represents a different response to the psychological pressure of captivity. Some retreat into themselves, seeking escape through mental withdrawal from their circumstances. Others cling to fragments of their former identities, maintaining the rituals and behaviors that defined their previous lives. But all of them are slowly breaking down, worn away by the constant stress of existence in an environment designed to strip away everything that makes them human. The orcs do not need to torture their prisoners directly. The simple act of keeping them alive in these conditions is torture enough. Commissar, Sergeant Cole's voice carries the crisp authority of a career soldier, though his words are slurred by the swelling around his broken jaw. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted, Sergeant. What's our tactical situation? It is a ritual question, asked to maintain the illusion that they are still soldiers with missions to complete rather than entertainment for alien sadists. Cole asks it every day, and every day Thorn provides the same assessment. Grim, Sergeant. No prospect of rescue, no possibility of escape. Our only remaining duty is to die with honor when our time comes. Understood, sir. How can we best serve the Emperor in our current circumstances? Another ritual question, but this one carries genuine weight. They are still servants of the Imperium, still bound by their oaths of loyalty and duty. The fact that they are prisoners does not release them from these obligations. By denying the enemy satisfaction, by refusing to break no matter what they do to us, by remembering that we are human beings, not animals to be used for sport. Cole nods, accepting this assessment with the same professionalism he might bring to a tactical briefing. "Very good, sir. I'll pass the word to the men." The exchange serves multiple purposes. It reinforces the chain of command and maintains military discipline even in their desperate circumstances. But more importantly, it reminds them that they still have choices, still have the ability to decide how they will face whatever comes next. This small act of defiance is perhaps their only weapon against the psychological assault of their captivity. The Orks can control their bodies, can determine when and how they die, but they cannot control their spirits unless those spirits choose to surrender. The afternoon brings fresh entertainment in the form of new prisoners. A dozen humans are marched into the factory complex by a group of Ork guards, their hands bound and their faces displaying the stunned expression of people who cannot quite believe what has happened to them. Thorn recognizes the uniforms. Planetary Defense Force, probably from one of the outer settlements that has fallen to the expanding Ork advance. These are not professional soldiers like his own men, but militia troops whose training consists mainly of parade drills and ceremonial duties. The guards drive their prisoners toward a large cage that has been set up in the center of the factory floor, clearly visible to workers throughout the complex. This is not a holding facility like the suspended cage where Thorn and his men await their fate. This is an arena designed to provide maximum visibility for whatever entertainment is planned. The new prisoners are forced into the arena cage, where they cluster together in the center of the space, looking around with obvious terror at the Orks who have gathered to watch their arrival. Some of them are weeping, others praying, a few maintaining stoic silence in the face of their circumstances. A Nob with elaborate decorations on his armor climbs onto a platform overlooking the arena. His voice, amplified by crude speakers, booms across the factory floor as he addresses the assembled crowd of greenskins. The words are in the Ork language, a brutal combination of roars and growls that sounds more like the calls of wild animals than intelligent speech. But the meaning is clear from context and the reactions of the audience. The new prisoners are going to provide sport for the assembled Orks. What follows is a display of cruelty so calculated and methodical that it challenges Thorn's understanding of the greenskin mentality. He has come to think of Orks as savage but essentially straightforward in their brutality. They kill because they enjoy killing. They fight because fighting brings them satisfaction. But what happens to the prisoners in the arena reveals a different aspect of Ork psychology, a capacity for sadism that rivals anything in human experience. The prisoners are not simply killed. They are tormented, driven to desperation through a series of escalating threats and false hopes. They are told they can earn their freedom by fighting each other, then informed that the survivors will face even worse fates. They are offered weapons, then forced to watch as those weapons are revealed to be booby-trapped or completely ineffective. Each psychological twist is designed to strip away another layer of human dignity, to reduce proud soldiers and loyal citizens to nothing more than terrified animals scrambling for survival. The Orks watch this degradation with obvious pleasure, cheering each new humiliation and betting on which prisoner will break first. The spectacle continues for hours, with fresh torments introduced as the old ones lose their entertainment value. Some prisoners attempt to maintain their composure, but the relentless psychological pressure eventually breaks even the strongest minds. By the end, the survivors are no longer recognizably human in their behavior. They fight each other over scraps of food, inform on their companions in hopes of earning better treatment, and beg their captors for mercy that will never come. When the entertainment finally ends, the broken remnants of what had once been Imperial citizens are dragged away to whatever fate awaits them. The Orks return to their work with obvious satisfaction, their appetites for cruelty temporarily sated by the afternoon's performance. But for Thorn and his companions watching from their suspended cage, the display serves as a preview of what awaits them. They now understand that their own deaths will not be quick or merciful. They will be used to entertain their captors, their suffering drawn out for maximum dramatic effect. "Emperor, preserve us," whispers Private Vance, his young face pale with horror at what they have witnessed. "The Emperor protects," Thorn replies automatically, though the words feel hollow in his mouth. If the Emperor protects, why are they here? Why has their service earned them nothing but suffering and degradation? But faith is not based on evidence or reward. Faith is the choice to believe in something greater than immediate circumstances, to hold fast to principles that transcend personal experience. And in this cage, suspended above the nightmare of orc industry, faith may be the only thing that can preserve their humanity in the face of deliberate dehumanization. Night falls again over the war camp, bringing no respite from the heat or the noise or the constant reminders of their captivity. Thorn lies awake, listening to the labored breathing of his companions and trying to prepare himself mentally for whatever tomorrow may bring. He thinks about his life before capture, the campaigns he has fought and the men he has led into battle. He remembers the weight of his bolt pistol in his hand, the authority in his voice when he issued orders, the respect in the eyes of soldiers who looked to him for leadership and inspiration. All of that is gone now, stripped away by circumstances beyond his control. He is no longer Commissar Marcus Thorn, servant of the Emperor and guardian of Imperial discipline. He is simply another prisoner, another source of entertainment for alien captors who value his suffering more than his service. But memory can be its own form of resistance. By remembering who he was, by holding fast to the values that defined his life, he can maintain some connection to the humanity that the orcs seek to destroy. They can control his body, but they cannot touch his spirit unless he allows them to do so. The factory floor below continues its eternal rhythm of construction and destruction, a mechanical heartbeat that marks time in a place where time has lost most of its meaning. Somewhere in the darkness, other prisoners wait for dawn and whatever fresh horrors it may bring. Tomorrow there will be new entertainments, new displays of cruelty designed to amuse the green-skinned masses. Some of the prisoners will break under the pressure, their minds snapping like overtaxed cables. Others will die from disease or despair, their bodies finally surrendering to conditions that no human was meant to endure. But some will endure, not because they are stronger or braver than their companions, but because they choose to endure, because they refuse to give their captors the satisfaction of complete victory, because they remember that they are human beings, created in the Emperor's image and blessed with the capacity for dignity even in the face of absolute degradation. This is what it means to be a prisoner of the Orks, not simply to suffer, but to choose how to suffer. Not simply to die, but to choose how to die. Not simply to break, but to choose what breaks and what remains whole. The Emperor protects, but sometimes protection takes forms that are difficult to recognize. Sometimes it comes not as rescue or deliverance, but as the strength to maintain one's humanity in circumstances designed to destroy it. In the cage above the Orc factory, suspended between the machinery of war and the indifferent stars, Commissar Marcus Thorn closes his eyes and prepares to face another day of captivity. He does not know if he will live or die, break or endure, find redemption or only suffering, but he knows that he will face whatever comes as a servant of the Emperor and a guardian of human dignity. And in a universe where such things are precious beyond measure, perhaps that knowledge is protection enough. The hours crawl past with the grinding persistence of the orc machinery below. Dawn comes not as a release from suffering, but as the beginning of fresh torment. Another day in the endless cycle of captivity that has become their existence. Thorn wakes to find Private Vance motionless beside him. The young soldier's struggle finally ended during the night. The boy's face is peaceful now, freed from the pain that had racked his body for days. Death in this place comes as a mercy rather than a tragedy. "He's better off," mutters Trooper Martinez, speaking his first coherent words in over a week. "At least they can't use him for sport now." The observation is both callous and compassionate, reflecting the altered moral landscape of their captivity. In the world beyond these bars, the death of a young soldier would be cause for mourning and remembrance. Here, it represents escape from a fate worse than death. Sergeant Cole helps Thorn move Vance's body to the corner of the cage, arranging it with what dignity their circumstances allow. There are no proper burial rites in this place, no ceremonies to mark the passage of the dead, but they speak a brief prayer over their fallen comrade, commending his soul to the Emperor's care. The prayer is interrupted by the arrival of their breakfast, such as it is. An orc grot tosses chunks of unidentifiable meat through the bars, along with a container of water that tastes strongly of rust and industrial chemicals. The food is barely edible, designed to keep them alive rather than nourish them properly. But they eat anyway, because survival requires fuel and hope requires survival. Each bite is an act of defiance against their captor's desire to see them waste away into nothing. Each swallow of contaminated water is a declaration that they will not surrender easily to despair. "How many days has it been, sir?" asks one of the civilian prisoners, a middle-aged clerk whose name Thorn has never learned. The man's voice is hollow, drained of everything that once made it human. 48, Thorn replies, though he is no longer certain of the exact count. Time moves strangely in captivity, measured not in hours or days, but in moments of suffering and brief respites from pain. 48 days, the clerk repeats as if testing the sound of the words. "My wife will think I'm dead by now. My children won't even remember what I look like." The observation hangs in the air like a physical presence, heavy with implications that none of them want to examine too closely. They are not simply imprisoned in this cage. They are disappearing from the world, erased from the lives of everyone who once knew them. "The Emperor remembers," Thorn says, offering what comfort he can. "Our service is not forgotten, even if our names are." But the words sound hollow even to his own ears. If the Emperor remembers, why does he not act? If their service matters, why are they here, abandoned to the mercy of aliens who know no mercy? These are dangerous questions, the kind that can shatter faith and leave a man with nothing to sustain him through trials that would break steel. Thorn has seen good soldiers destroyed by such doubts, their minds turning inward until only madness remains. Below them, the factory floor comes alive with fresh activity as the day shift begins their work. New projects are taking shape under the supervision of orc mechs, whose understanding of engineering principles appears to be based entirely on intuition and wishful thinking. A massive artillery piece is being assembled near the center of the complex, its barrel so large that it requires a crane to move the individual components. The weapon's design violates every principle of metallurgy and ballistics that Thorn learned during his training. Yet it somehow manages to maintain structural integrity despite its obvious flaws. This is the mystery of orc technology, the way it functions despite being theoretically impossible. Human weapons work because they are designed according to scientific principles and manufactured to precise tolerances. Orc weapons work because their creators believe they should work, and that belief somehow translates into functional reality. The implications of this phenomenon are disturbing on multiple levels. If orc technology functions through faith rather than science, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? How can the universe accommodate such violations of physical law? But perhaps the more important question is what it reveals about the power of belief. If orc conviction can make their impossible weapons functional, what might human faith accomplish under the right circumstances? Commissar. The voice belongs to the tech priest, though his words emerge as mechanical whispers through damaged vocal apparatus. I have been observing their construction methods. Thorn moves closer to the wounded adept, whose injuries have left him barely capable of speech. The man's augmentations were crudely removed by curious orcs, leaving exposed circuitry and weeping wounds that refuse to heal properly. What have you observed? Their technology. It should not function. The stress tolerances are insufficient. The power distribution is non-chaotic, yet the machines operate within acceptable parameters. The tech priest pauses, his remaining eye focusing on something beyond the bars of their cage. There is something unnatural about their engineering, as if the laws of physics bend to accommodate their primitive understanding. Are you saying their weapons work through faith rather than science? I am saying that the distinction may be less clear than we have been taught. The conversation is interrupted by commotion on the factory floor below. A group of orc guards is escorting a new prisoner toward one of the smaller cages, but this captive is different from the usual human victims. The prisoner is an Astartes, a space marine whose power armor has been stripped away to reveal the enhanced physiology beneath. Even without his equipment, the warrior moves with deadly grace, his augmented muscles coiled with barely contained violence. The sight of one of the Emperor's angels in captivity sends a shock through the human prisoners. Space Marines are mythical figures to most Imperial citizens, legendary warriors whose prowess in battle is beyond normal human comprehension. To see one reduced to prisoner status challenges fundamental assumptions about Imperial supremacy. But the Orks seem delighted by their capture, chattering excitedly in their brutal language as they secure the Astartes in his designated cage. They clearly understand the significance of their prize, the propaganda value of demonstrating their dominance over the Imperium's finest warriors. The Space Marine's presence changes the dynamic of the prison complex. Other captives look toward his cage with desperate hope, as if his mere existence might somehow lead to their salvation. But Thorn recognizes the truth of their situation. If the Orks can capture and imprison a Space Marine, what hope do ordinary humans have of escape or rescue? The warrior's captivity is not a prelude to liberation, but final proof of the hopelessness of their circumstances. The afternoon brings fresh entertainment in the form of gladiatorial combat. A makeshift arena has been constructed on the factory floor. Its walls high enough to prevent escape, but low enough to provide good visibility for spectators. 2 prisoners are selected for the contest, both of them captured Imperial guardsmen whose resistance to their captors has marked them for special attention. They are given crude weapons, little more than sharpened metal rods, and told that the survivor will receive better treatment. It is a lie, of course. Both men will die regardless of the outcome, their death simply delayed by different amounts depending on the entertainment value they provide. But desperation makes people believe impossible promises, and both prisoners approach the combat with grim determination. The fight itself is brutal and graceless, neither combatant possessing the skill or equipment necessary for proper martial display. They circle each other warily, looking for openings that might provide advantage in a contest where victory means only temporary postponement of death. The Orks watch with obvious pleasure, their shouts of encouragement growing louder as blood flows and wounds multiply. They place bets on the outcome, argue about technique, and offer suggestions for how the combatants might make the spectacle more entertaining. When one fighter finally falls, mortally wounded by a thrust that penetrates his lung, the victor does not celebrate. He simply stands over his defeated opponent, understanding that he has purchased a few more hours of life at the cost of another man's death. The Orks reward his victory by immediately selecting him for the next contest, this time against a prisoner who has been given superior weapons and armor. The implied message is clear. Success in their entertainment brings not reward but escalation, each victory leading to more difficult challenges until inevitable defeat. "They're learning," observed Sergeant Cole, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Studying how we fight, how we break, what motivates us to kill each other." Thorn nods, recognizing the pattern that Cole has identified. The Orks are not simply amusing themselves with gladiatorial combat. They are conducting research, gathering data about human psychology and combat effectiveness. Every contest teaches them something new about their prisoners' capabilities and limitations. Every death provides insight into what drives humans to desperation. Every act of resistance reveals weaknesses that can be exploited in future encounters. The knowledge they gain will be applied not just to their treatment of prisoners, but to their combat doctrine against Imperial forces. Each broken captive becomes a source of tactical intelligence that will make the Orks more effective in future battles. This realization adds another layer of horror to their captivity. They are not simply victims, but unwilling participants in their captors' military education. Their suffering serves to strengthen the enemy's ability to inflict similar suffering on others. "We have to resist," Cole continues, his words carrying the authority of a career soldier. "Not just for our own dignity, but to deny them information they can use against our comrades." But resistance in their circumstances is a complex concept. Open defiance will only result in more elaborate punishments, providing the Orks with even more entertainment value. Passive resistance may preserve their dignity but offers no tactical advantage. The most effective form of resistance may be simply to die well when their time comes, to face whatever torments await them with courage and honor. Such defiance may not save their lives, but it will preserve their humanity and deny their captors the satisfaction of complete victory. Evening brings a temporary reduction in the factory's noise level, though the work never completely stops. Night shifts of Ork workers continue the endless process of construction and destruction that defines their society. Thorn uses the relative quiet to speak privately with each of his surviving companions, assessing their mental state and providing what counsel he can. The psychological pressure of captivity affects different people in different ways, and maintaining morale requires constant attention. The tech priest has retreated almost entirely into mechanical contemplation, his damaged augmentation still attempting to process data about Ork technology. His observations may be valuable, but his increasing disconnection from human reality is troubling. The civilian clerk has begun talking to himself, carrying on lengthy conversations with family members who exist only in his imagination. The behavior provides him with comfort but suggests that his grip on reality is slipping. Sergeant Cole maintains the discipline and bearing of a professional soldier, but Thorn can see the strain in his eyes, the constant effort required to hold himself together in circumstances that would break most men. The remaining prisoners display various stages of psychological deterioration, from withdrawal and depression to manic episodes and violent outbursts. Each represents a different response to the same unbearable pressure. "What's the point, Commissar?" The question comes from Trooper Martinez, whose periods of lucidity are becoming increasingly rare. "Why do we keep fighting when we know how this ends?" It is the question that haunts every prisoner, the doubt that gnaws at the foundation of resistance and honor. In the face of certain death and inevitable suffering, what purpose does continued struggle serve? "Because that's what makes us human," Thorn replies, falling back on principles that have guided him through decades of service. Animals surrender to their circumstances. Humans choose how to face them. But what's the point of being human if humanity gets you nothing but pain? The question strikes at the heart of their situation, challenging the very assumptions that make resistance possible. If human dignity has no practical value, if honor brings no reward except additional suffering, why maintain either? Because the alternative is to become something else, Thorn answers. To let them turn us into what they want us to be instead of what we choose to be. But even as he speaks the words, he wonders if they are true. Is there really a choice in circumstances like these? Or is choice itself an illusion that makes suffering more bearable? The debate continues through the night, a philosophical discussion that takes on desperate urgency in their current circumstances. Each prisoner must find their own answer to the fundamental question of whether human dignity has meaning when it cannot be defended. Morning arrives with news that changes everything. Word spreads through the prison complex that an Imperial rescue fleet has been detected at the edge of the system, a massive force that includes several Space Marine chapters and supporting guard regiments. The information comes from newly captured prisoners, men who were taken during the Imperial advance toward the Ork war camp. Their reports speak of orbital bombardments and armored assaults, of green tides being pushed back by disciplined Imperial forces. For the first time since their capture, hope kindles in the hearts of the prisoners. Rescue may actually be possible. Their suffering may have an end beyond death. Their names may not be forgotten after all. But hope, in a place like this, can be more dangerous than despair. It makes the present moment harder to bear, adds the weight of possibility to circumstances that were already almost unbearable. The Orks seem unconcerned by news of the Imperial advance. If anything, they appear excited by the prospect of fresh combat, their work on the factory floor taking on new urgency as they prepare for battle. Additional weapons are wheeled out of storage areas, massive artillery pieces that had been completed weeks or months earlier. Vehicle parks come alive with activity as mechs perform final adjustments on war machines that will soon taste combat. The entire war camp transforms itself into a hive of preparation, every Ork contributing to the effort according to their specialized knowledge and abilities. The enthusiasm is infectious, spreading through the greenskin population like a virus of anticipation. They're not afraid, observes Cole, watching the activity through the bars of their cage. They should be terrified of what's coming, but they're excited instead. Thorn nods, recognizing the fundamental difference between human and Ork psychology that Cole has identified. Humans fear battle because they understand its costs, the probability of death or maiming that comes with combat. But Orks welcome battle because they understand its rewards, the satisfaction that comes from testing their strength against worthy opponents. The possibility of death only makes the contest more meaningful, adds stakes that elevate violence from mere brutality to sacred ritual. Do you think they'll reach us in time? The question comes from one of the civilian prisoners, a woman whose hope has made her more talkative than she has been in weeks. Thorn considers the tactical situation, trying to estimate how long an Imperial assault might take to penetrate Ork defenses. The war camp is heavily fortified, protected by overlapping fields of fire and defended by thousands of enthusiastic greenskins. Even if the rescue force succeeds in breaking through the outer perimeter, they will face street-to-street fighting through industrial complexes designed to channel attackers into kill zones. The Orks have had months to prepare their defenses, and they know the terrain better than any Imperial force could. It's possible, he says, offering what encouragement he can without raising false hopes. But we should prepare for the possibility that rescue may not come. The words are harsh but necessary. False optimism in their circumstances can be more destructive than honest pessimism, leading to psychological collapse when reality fails to match expectations. But the seed of hope has been planted, and it grows despite his cautionary words. The other prisoners begin to discuss rescue scenarios, debating the tactics that Imperial forces might use and the timeline for their potential liberation. The conversations serve a useful purpose, providing distraction from their immediate circumstances and giving them something to focus on besides their suffering. But Thorn knows that hope can be weaponized by their captors, used to inflict even greater psychological damage. If rescue fails to materialize, or if it arrives too late to save them, the disappointment may prove more destructive than despair ever was. The day progresses with increasing signs of preparation for battle. Anti-aircraft weapons are positioned throughout the war camp. Their crude but effective designs capable of bringing down Imperial aircraft. Defensive positions are reinforced with additional armor plating and obstacle systems. Most importantly, the prisoners begin to notice changes in their treatment. Guards become more attentive to their cages, conducting frequent inspections and head counts. Additional security measures are implemented, making escape or rescue more difficult. The Orks understand the propaganda value of their human captives, particularly the Space Marine, whose presence has become a symbol of Imperial defeat. They will not allow these prizes to be reclaimed without extracting maximum entertainment value from their deaths. "They're planning something special for us," Cole observes, his soldiers' instincts recognizing the signs of preparation for a significant event. When the Imperial forces get close enough, they'll want to put on a show. The realization chills the blood of every prisoner who hears it. Their rescue may become the catalyst for their destruction, their potential liberation transformed into the occasion for their final torment. But knowledge of this possibility also provides them with power, the ability to choose how they will face whatever spectacle their captors have planned. They can meet their deaths as broken victims or as defiant servants of the Emperor. The choice is theirs, and in a place where choice has been systematically stripped away, even this limited power represents a form of victory. Night falls over the war camp with the sound of preparation continuing unabated. The Orks work through the darkness, their enthusiasm for the coming battle driving them to superhuman efforts of construction and organization. From their suspended cage, the prisoners can see the entire complex preparing for war. Weapon emplacements spring up like metal flowers, vehicle parks expand to accommodate new arrivals, and supply depots overflow with munitions and equipment. It is both impressive and terrifying, a display of industrial capacity that rivals anything in the Imperium. The Orks may be crude and savage, but they possess an undeniable genius for warfare that makes them formidable opponents. The sight also drives home the magnitude of the challenge facing any rescue force. Even if Imperial ships succeed in establishing orbital supremacy, the ground assault will face prepared positions defended by enthusiastic enemies who welcome death in battle. Commissar. The voice belongs to the Space Marine speaking for the first time since his capture. His words carry across the distance between cages with superhuman clarity, audible despite the background noise of Ork activity. "Yes, my lord? When the time comes, remember your duty. Do not let them use us to demoralize our brothers. We die as servants of the Emperor, not as entertainment for Xenos." The words carry the weight of absolute authority, a command that transcends rank and circumstance. The Space Marine is reminding them that they still have obligations beyond their own survival, responsibilities to the broader Imperial cause. "Understood, my lord. We will not dishonor the Emperor or give comfort to his enemies." But even as he speaks the words, Thorn wonders if they will be able to live up to such commitment when the moment of testing arrives. It is easy to speak of duty and honor in the abstract, but much harder to maintain such principles when faced with ingenious tortures designed to break human will. The Space Marine's presence both inspires and intimidates, reminding them of what they should aspire to while highlighting their own limitations. He represents the pinnacle of human achievement in warfare, while they are merely ordinary men caught in circumstances beyond their control. Yet even he is here, reduced to prisoner status by the same forces that captured them. His captivity proves that courage and skill alone are insufficient protection against the capricious nature of war. The night passes slowly, marked by dreams of rescue and nightmares of betrayal, hope and despair warring in the minds of prisoners who have learned to expect nothing but suffering from each new day. When morning finally comes, it brings the distant sound of battle, the thunder of orbital bombardment and the distinctive whine of Imperial aircraft. The rescue force has arrived and the final phase of their captivity is about to begin. But Thorn knows that rescue and liberation are not the same thing. Their physical salvation may yet prove to be their spiritual destruction. Their deliverance from captivity transformed into participation in their own degradation. The Emperor protects, but sometimes protection requires sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest service lies not in survival but in the manner of one's death. And in the cage above the Ork factory, suspended between salvation and damnation, Commissar Marcus Thorn prepares to discover which form of service the Emperor will require of him. The sounds of battle grow closer as Imperial forces push through the outer defenses of the war camp. The distinctive crack of bolter fire mingles with the roar of Ork weapons, creating a symphony of violence that speaks to the approaching climax of their ordeal. Whatever happens next, they will face it as human beings, as servants of the Emperor, as men who chose dignity over desperation even in the darkest circumstances imaginable. And perhaps, in the end, that choice alone will be victory enough.